right, good morning. Well, hey, welcome to King's Church. My name is Dylan. We're so honored that you're with us this morning, and I have the privilege of leading us together. And if you're new with us, there's a card on your chair, card on every chair for those of you who are new with us. We'd love for you to fill that out. We'd love to connect with you and help you get connected here at King's. I remember 13 years ago what it was like to be new to church. And I know that's a scary feeling. I know that's an intimidating feeling. And we just want you to know you're welcome here. We love you. We want to help you get connected however we can. That card is a great tool to do that. And one of the things you're going to see on that card is a box called Growth Track. And Growth Track, if you're wondering, it's a 3-step course to help you grow in your faith, to help you get connected to the community, and really to help you leverage your life for all that God has for you. And one of the things we believe is that God has a plan and a purpose for your life, that your life is more than just a 9 to 5. It's more than just going through the motions and surviving, but actually God has a plan for your life, not only for you to know Him and for you to get connected to a life-giving church, but also for you to make a difference in the world. And that's what our Growth Track is all about. So if you have not attended Growth Track, we want to invite you to attend November Growth Track. It's literally the first 3 Sundays of the month in November. So right after the 11 o'clock service, we head up to the Growth Track room. We've got lunch. We've got childcare. Everything's taken care of. And it's a 1-hour course from 12:30 to 1:30, and we're going to help you do all those things. So if you're interested in Growth Track, go ahead and check that box. Our team will get you set up to attend in November. Also, for those of you who give and give generously, I just want to say thank you to you for how you give and how you put God first in your life. I also want to thank you for how you're making a difference, not only in our church, because all that you give, I mean, it's the grace of God, but it's your generosity that makes it possible to do all that we do in our church, in our community, and also in the world. And our brothers and sisters in Nepal, we just prayed for them at our first Wednesday prayer meeting, which that was an amazing time together on Wednesday night to worship and call upon God for many things this last Wednesday. It'll come up again in November if you missed it. The first Wednesday of every month, we gather to worship and pray and receive communion. But one of the people we prayed for is we prayed for our churches in Nepal. And if you don't know, Nepal is one of the most, it's in the 1040 window of the most unreached people groups in the earth. And we've got over 40 house churches there that are serving Jesus and doing amazing in their faith. But they're facing a really hard time right now with COVID-19. And your generosity has made it possible for us to walk with them, to serve them, to love them. So I just want to thank you. Can we put our hands together for this church, just being a generous church that's sowing into the world? It makes it such a joy to lead how generous you are and how you really touch in the world with your generosity. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. As always, if you want to give, I think there's some instructions on the screen for how you can do that. You can do it in the envelope. You can do it online. But just thank you for your generosity. Well, I'm going to get out of the way here in just a sec. We've got some friends with us from Visalia, California, Travis and Tiffany Aicklin, an amazing couple. They've blessed my wife, Rebecca, and I so much over the years, and really an example to us, role models to us. They planted their church, Radiant Church, 16 years ago in Visalia, California. Let's put our hands together for Radiant, just being an amazing church in California. And if you don't know, we're a baby church plant. We just opened the doors here on Easter Sunday, so a little over 6 months old, and just so thankful to have a family of churches that we're a part of called Confluence, where people like Travis and Tiffany will take time out of their lives and hop on a plane and fly to the Midwest, and get some barbecue and really sow into us and help us lay a foundation that is going to help us for years and generations to come. And if you don't know Travis and Tiffany, they're not like me. I'm kind of a driver, task-oriented, let's get it done. And Travis and Tiffany, they've got so much passion in their hearts, but such a love for people and a love for the church. And that they will make you laugh, they'll make you cry, and they'll make you want to follow Jesus all in 5 minutes. And I'm like, I don't know how you do it, but I'm thankful for it. And Travis also loves fried chicken. So let's put our hands together. Travis and Tiffany, welcome, guys.
We are so excited to be here. Our head and hearts are excited. Our bodies are saying it's 7 a.m. and you don't have much to say. But my head and heart are saying something else. We're excited to serve this church because we love church plants. You guys are doing an amazing thing here. You really are. Like, to plant a church is a big thing. To plant a church in a global pandemic is a really big thing. So we're proud of you. Glad to support this. We love the Neelys. We love Dan and Kakita. There are others here that we know and we love. We love the Chiefs. We don't. I was just told I had to say that in order to reach you with my message. We're actually West Coast Raider fans. No, that's not true. I made that up just to tick you off and see if everyone's awake. No, we're not Raider fans. We're Charger fans. No. That's not true either. We're not any of those things. My wife and I have been in ministry for 20 years together, and we have never done this. We've never team taught. So we'll see how this goes. We didn't match on purpose because we were so scared to be Travis and Tiffany from California and then finish each other's sentences on stage. So because of the way that we're teaching, we're not necessarily going to unpack a text this morning. We're here just to share our lives with you guys. So the church that we pastor back home, we planted when we were 25 years old and, had a handle on things. Actually, all we had was a bunch of idealism that was dashed over the next decade. So by God's grace, the church endured and the church has grown, and our family also has grown. We have 5 daughters to show for our almost 19 years of marriage. Tomorrow is our anniversary. And so, yeah, so to prepare to preach this morning on marriage, my wife and I got in a massive fight. And I wish I was joking right now. And you should, if you don't, you should expect that. Just in general. It's hard because I'm always surprised by it, but it shouldn't be surprising at this point. Listen, if you're here and you're wanting to be intentional and redefine your singleness, you should expect that as you take those intentional steps, some of that nonsense is going to come your way. If you're here and you've set yourself to give, you just joined this church, I'm going to give, you should expect some bills to come your way. If you're here and saying, I want to do something new, I want to start a new conversation in our marriage, you should expect the same old conversations to come up. You shouldn't be surprised when you face trials, especially when you're taking intentional steps. So don't, when you face opposition, decide something's wrong. Oh no, it's right. And you will face opposition as you step forward into new things. If you're here and you want to belong to this church and you're intentionally deciding, I want to participate in the life of this church, well, you should expect some relational hurt to happen and to have to work through that and move through that because that's a part of the process. So in prepping to preach, we got in a huge fight. And it was late. A couple nights ago, it was late. We're in this conversation, and the conversation wasn't going anywhere. So I said, I just want to go to bed. Can we just go to sleep and start this? I've got no faith that we're coming through this tonight. And Tiffany answered, oh, yeah, great. Yeah, let's go to bed. And then we'll go preach on marriage. That'll be great, And with that, we went to bed. The worst part about the fight was it was like the same fight we've been in for almost 20 years. It doesn't start that way. It starts, and I think we're talking about the issue at hand. I think we're talking about what happened. And as we continue to talk, I find out that we're not talking about that thing. We're talking about the thing under the thing that just so happens to turn out to be the same thing we've been talking about for 20 years. And so I say all this to say that we're not experts. We don't have it all kind of neatly packaged to present to you this morning. That's not where we're at. And you should know that Christian marriage is not perfect. Christian marriage, though, is perfectly designed by God to shape you into the image of his Son. If you are married, your marriage is the primary tool that God will use to shape you and form you into the image of his Son. So we want to share a few things that we are learning to do, and these things are going to serve you even if you're not married. So even if you're here and you're not married, these things are going to serve you. Hopefully, they'll serve every relationship that you're in. But I want to say beware or warning. These things are way less spiritual than you may think they are. We're not going to encourage you to pray together. We're not going to encourage you to fast together. We're not going to encourage you to journal or read your Bible. Those disciplines are incredible, by the way. I'm not talking those things down. What I'm trying to say is this thing's way more basic for us. It's way more elementary for us. Because for Tiffany and I, we're learning how to listen and make requests. Is very, very basic. And maybe you have a handle on these things, but we don't. There's a lot that the Lord's showing us. That we've been listening to our listening. And we've been learning to make requests, which can be hard to do after 20 years. And for sure, when we talk about marriage, we're talking about something that's brought us great joy and satisfaction in life, but we're also talking about something that's been full of disappointment. And as we face that, it can be hard to hear, and it can be hard to make requests. So these things are quite profound, and we're hoping that as we share this morning, you'll end up with the grace to listen well and to ask vulnerably for what you need. Tiff? Segue?
Yes, as you were talking, I was thinking about how basically every fight or point of conflict that we have inevitably always boils down to, I had hoped you were going to be more than you are, and I had hoped that I was going to be more than I am. And that kind of perpetual place of having need that we are unable to meet for each other. Need that inevitably ends up driving us to God. And so about, 5-6 years ago, we ended up in a counselor's office trying to work through some of these places where we felt stuck. We just recommend Christian counseling to anybody who needs it. There's no shame in that. And I was sitting down with the wife of the couple, asking for help. And she started talking to me about something called empathy. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm real good at empathy. she's like, oh yeah, so we're talking about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm totally good. I'm totally good at empathy. As long as what you're feeling is valid. If it's not valid, then, and I did this motion. I literally, like with my hands, physically flicked it away. Like if what you're feeling is not valid, it needs to go away. Get out of here. And at the time, I thought, yeah, that's great. Like, I totally back up what I just said. I'm into that. And leaving the office, and then now, the next 5 years, God kind of using this moment in the counselor's office to begin to slowly show me that I am not good at empathy, that I'm not good at listening, actually, and that deciding that something is valid or not to me isn't a very loving way to live with my husband or even my children. And so as Trav would bring things to me, if I didn't like them or I didn't agree with them or I didn't think they were true, or I would enter in a way where I'm being silent and receiving what he's sharing, but in my heart I'm wanting to change his mind, fix his perspective, get him to come along to seeing things the way I see them, because the way I see them is better. and I do this with my kids as well. So just started on a journey with God of beginning to notice how I try to flick things away from me that I don't want, and kind of the impact of that on my marriage, on my relationship with my daughters even. The years of Trav coming and bringing things and actually not feeling heard by me, not feeling safe by me, like a really difficult time realizing that what is needed oftentimes in relationship, rather than an answer or a scripture or a cheerlead, is just, I could totally see how you'd feel that way, and I'm sorry you're feeling that way. And how hard, how literally difficult it was for me to do that at times.
Yeah.
So I found out I was a bad listener. I thought that I was a good listener, and I found out I was a bad listener. And even in my silence, like, I'm being silent, and so I'm doing a good job of listening. This is called listening, me not talking. And realizing that if I'm using the silence to listen to my own inner monologue, to form a critique or a rebuttal, to prepare my own story that's, oh yeah, I have a story like that, or in other words, to focus less on what the other person is sharing with me and more on what I think about what the other person is sharing with me, then I'm not doing a good job of listening. So in this process of kind of living in this and realizing this over time, I eventually came to a place where like I started pursuing, I'm reading books on listening. I'm trying to grow in empathy. Like, I'm pursuing this, and I'm telling people I'm pursuing growth in this area on behalf of my husband. I'm pursuing growth in this area so that I can love my kids better. And then one day I hit a wall, and I realized, oh, I am not good at listening and empathy because I don't think I've actually received good empathy over the course of my life, or even been able to let my heart get to a place where I could be vulnerable enough to, like, say that's what I need. And so, again, where marital fights begin to expose really like a deep need in my own heart, that I'm not able to give Trav what he needs because I am not even receiving what I need for myself from God. So when you find yourself up against a deficit or a need, where do you go? So this little track kind of drove me back to, okay, so I need to be listened to, and I need empathy because I'm made in the image of a God who is a listener. And again, I know these are things like we all know. Like we know that God listens. But I just want to take a moment and just let that truth kind of land on our hearts in a fresh way. Because it is profound that God speaks to us. Like sometimes I have a hard time wrapping my mind around why God would, come down and communicate with us,
Right.
But what is even more profound, I'm realizing, than a God who would be willing to speak to us, to have a relationship in which he would communicate with us, is a God that would be willing to listen to us. Like God listens to us. God listens to you. He longs to listen to you, to hear your heart. He's generous in the way that he listens to us. It's incredible. This book, The Listening Life by Adam McHugh, I love this quote. It says, "It should come as no surprise when God, the heavenly King, exercises his sovereign right to speak. If anyone is entitled to issue proclamations on any subject he desires, amid all the fanfare the nations can muster, it is the Lord Almighty. The true King has spoken the prime word, from which all words trace their source, and he will have the last word when all words will fall silent at his feet. But what might blindside us is the discovery that the God of the Bible listens.
Yeah.
The cosmos hangs together by his word. Galaxies and constellations obey when he speaks. But the undisputed champion of creation is a listener. God has absolutely no obligation to pay attention to anyone or anything. He could wield his power however he chooses, and everyone could only clear out of the way. The Lord astonishes us and completely flips power on its ear by entering into listening relationships with people. In no other royal court have hearings been so generously extended." This is incredible. I struggle to listen to my own kids often. Like really listen to them, not do the like, when they're repeating themselves or talking about things that don't matter at all, or, I'm exhausted at night and there they go, just needing to say a lot of words, and I'm like, God listens to us. God in all of his power and perfection and beauty. Like he sees it all. He knows it all. And he listens to my rants about the way things are that aren't even true or right or accurate. He listens to my feelings and responses to things that are going on, even when they're immature and weak and ignorant.
Wow.
He listens to us. He listens to us in our weakness, in our sin, when we're freaking out. He listens to us. He hears our cries. And the Psalms say that he bends down his ear to listen. And not partially or dismissively like I do, but generously and deeply. He's not humoring us until we tire ourselves out. Our King gives us his attention, turning his face towards us. Numbers 6, when God said that he wanted to bless his people. Bless my people by speaking this blessing over them. The Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Turn his face towards you and give you peace. It's just been astounding me lately as I read that, to think about how twice in that small stanza of blessing, the way God wanted his people to be blessed, 2 times it talks about him giving his face to us, turning his face towards us, making his face shine upon us. His presence, his attention, his eyes, his ears. That's the way God's shared himself with us. It's incredible. So in kind of realizing in a way that I never had before that God is a listener and how incredible that is, I enrolled in the Jesus School of Listening and just started looking at the life of Jesus and how did Jesus listen and who did he listen to and what kind of questions did he ask? He was always asking questions to draw people out. He was asking the question, he was responding to them with a question. They would ask a question, he would hear the deep longing in their heart underneath the question and ask another question to draw them out. Like in the story of the woman at the well. If you just read the life of Jesus with this lens, you'll start to see just the incredible way that he presenced, gave his attention to, and listened to people. He had 3 years to save the whole world and tell us everything we needed to know about God. And yet every time someone cried out to him, he stopped, took the time to listen to them, and gave them his attention. There's a story in Luke 24 about 2 disappointed men who were walking away from the death of Jesus. Luke 24, starting in verse 13, it says, "That very day, 2 of them were going to a village named Emmaus, and about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other as they walked about the things that had happened. And while they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing it was him, so he concealed himself from them. And he said to them, 'What are you guys talking about?' He knew what they were talking about. 'What's the conversation that you're holding with each other as you walk?' And they stood still, looking sad. And then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, 'Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there these days?' And he said to them, 'What things?' He's pretending like he doesn't know what they're talking about. Why is he doing that? Because he's creating space for them to be heard. He's drawing out a place for them to share their perspective of what happened. Is it the right perspective? Is it the true perspective? No, and he right here at the beginning, he could have revealed himself to them right away. He could have said, this is what really happened, and corrected them and told them the truth, which he does eventually. But first, he conceals himself, he asks questions, and he draws out their perspective and what they're feeling, and he listens to them. It's really profound to me. And I feel like there's a sparkle in his eye. Like, I feel like you can hear the twinkle in his eye when he's like, what things? There's like a joy and a humor in this interaction. He doesn't ruin like the surprise, because he wants to make room for their sadness and disappointment and grief. It's important to him. He delays his response so that they have a place to express their emotions and their unresolved tensions. He invites them into honesty, vulnerability, and intimacy, and it seems like he enjoys it. What good listening requires. True listening honors the other person and says, you're worth my time, attention, and care, even if I don't see things the same way that you do or agree with what you're saying. And I feel like the heart of a listener is really expressed in Philippians 2:1-8, where it's saying, if you've received any encouragement or comfort or participation or affection or sympathy from Christ, then make my joy complete by having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men and being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Listening is an act of humility. It's counting others more significant than ourselves. It wars against our selfishness. A listening heart is able to stop in the middle of a conversation and say, like, yeah, you're right, that's true. Listening is laying down our life in a moment for someone else, or setting ourselves aside to make room for them the way that Jesus set himself aside to make room for us. And so yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you guys.
It'd be worth saying too, just because of the cultural moment we're in, listening to someone doesn't mean that you're agreeing with them. I think we start to panic and go, if I listen any longer, they're going to think I agree with them. So I just need to let them know that I'm not on board. Well, it's interesting. Jesus finally does set these two disillusioned disciples straight. He does bring the truth, but only after he listens to them. And this is important, not just like in our marriage, but in our moment right now. You can listen to someone who's on the other side of an issue. And listening generously does not mean agreeing. But you can listen, you can make space, you can inquire, you can draw them out. Why do you feel that way before you inwardly protest? Does that make sense? Another thing that we've noticed is that Tiffany and I are pretty good at extending empathy towards our kids and not so good at towards one another. The picture that's been working for us, because again we have 5 kids, so we've seen a lot of skinned knees, we've seen a lot of falls, and when your kid comes to you having been hurt, you can say a few things to them, and we've said all these things. You can say, suck it up, it's nothing, you're fine. Or you can say, why'd you do that? I told you not to do that. It's your own dang fault your fingers got slammed in the door. You know, these are responses. But when we bend down and say to them, oh, I'm sorry that hurt, it's funny, the response, because they're kind of like, okay. They take off. The second we stoop down and go, oh, that must have really hurt, they're like, thanks, you know. And it's so funny because we think we've outgrown that, but it's not true. Like, I find that as I'm sharing stuff with Tiff and she's like, ouch, that hurts. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, you know, and I kind of go on. But when she fights me on it, or tries to minimize it, or even maximize it, you know, it's just like, it doesn't quite cut it. When we practice this with one another, there's a real difference that's made. So I've been learning to make requests. I know you might be tempted to think like Tiff's was like really spiritual, and then all you have to do is ask. That's it? Like your job is, you've been learning how to ask? Is that it? Is asking easy? I mean, we're in a series called Asking for a Friend because we don't want to ask for ourselves. Because we don't want it to be exposed. Is it easy to know what you need? I mean, half the time I don't even know what I need, let alone know how to ask for what I need in a way that's not needy. Do you know what I mean? So this isn't that simple. And I've been learning how to do it. It's really tough to make requests. And in this series, we're asking for a friend because we lack maybe some information or we want to better understand something. But try taking what you need and asking someone to meet that need. This is very risky because you put the ball in someone else's hands and they can either grant your request or deny your request. If you ask a dumb question, the worst thing that happens is you're dumb. But if you come and present your need to someone and someone denies that, you end up feeling rejected. And this is going on in our marriages probably more than we know. And it's especially difficult when we've faced disappointment or we feel like we've been denied over and over again. Jesus comes to the pool of Bethesda in John chapter 5, and he finds a man there who's been an invalid for 38 years. For 38 years, he's been lying there trying to be healed. He's trying to get into the water, because if he can get into the water, when the angel stirs the water, he'll be healed. Jesus walks up to the man and says to him, "Do you want to be healed?" Again, a really obvious question. And I think what Jesus is trying to do is, again, draw this man out. But instead of answer the simple question that this man who's been paralyzed for 38 years could probably easily and quickly answer, the man answers him, "Sir, I got no one to put me in the water. When the pool's stirred up, I seem to get there last, and while I'm going, just another one cuts in before me." He couldn't answer the very simple question that Jesus put before him because he started rehearsing his disappointments. And certainly this is the case in our long-standing relationships with one another, right? Hurts have a way of dominating, and we can decide, I'm not going to risk that again. I'm not going to ask again. I'm not going to risk further disappointment, because that's just the way he is. And that's just the way she is. And that's just the way it is. And that's just the way it's going to be. And we stop making requests because we don't want to risk hurt. And I'm learning, even in my relationship with God, I'm learning to ask again. To really put myself in a place of counting on him. To bring my need before him. We're consistently asked in Scripture to ask. You're asked to ask. You're commanded in Scripture to ask. Want to know why? Because it's not easy. It's not easy, and it doesn't come naturally to vulnerably place our need before another person. This is risky business and can be painful. So we stop asking in order to avoid pain. How's that going for you guys? You know, the whole avoiding pain thing. That's hilarious to me, because I stop asking thinking I'm avoiding pain or hurt. And avoiding pain and hurt is like avoiding gravity. You're a fool if you think that by not risking, you're avoiding pain. You're only perpetuating it. So I'm learning to ask in my marriage again. We don't like to ask. We like to leak, hint, control, and complain. That's what we do, especially if we've been disappointed. We like to leak instead of make requests. This happens to me as a pastor all the time. I get done preaching, I go down front. I'm sure you don't do this, but someone comes up to me, and this is what they say. "Yeah, at my last church, I didn't really have any friends." And I don't know, we'd been going there for like 2 years, and like no one even noticed when we left. What is that person asking? What's the request that they're unwilling to make because they've been hurt? "Will you get a coffee with me, Travis?" But they won't ask. They'll leak. "Will you be my friend?" But that's scary, isn't it? To put yourself out there, to be vulnerable like that. We like to leak. We like to hint. I can't come home. You know, I live in California. I can't come home and say to my wife, "Will you make me something to eat?" It's just not that time. It's not that day and age, is it? So I don't. And I go, "Oh man, I'm starved. Just starved." Worked right through lunch probably today. Just hoping. Because I don't want to make a request. Because to come before her and say, "Will you make me something to eat?" is going to lead to her being like, "What do you think I did all day? You make yourself a sandwich, you know?" What decade are you living in? We like to complain rather than make a request. And you know what complaint is? Well, one, it's easy because it's about them. But complaint is just justifying your resignation. Here again is why I'm resigned to this. And asking requires vulnerability and requires us to give up control, which is tough for us. So I just want to end this time of sharing by giving you a tool that has really helped our marriage. And I'm finding out that under every complaint that I have, what lies under it is an unmet longing or desire that's gone unvoiced. I've not shared it. So I'm learning when I'm in complaint or when I'm dealing with like a criticism of my wife to dig a little deeper and try to discover the unmet longing that lies beneath my criticism of Tiffany, because you know what it's like when you come with a complaint, right? Well, that person's going to fight you on that, right? But what I've found is that when you make yourself vulnerable and share your unmet longing or your desire that lies at the root of your complaint, well, then it has the power to change the conversation you're in, even the arguments that you've been in for quite some time. So I'm going to ask you to do something, not out loud, or I mean, you can if you want, but I wouldn't advise it. What's the biggest criticism you have of your spouse? What's the biggest criticism? Like they are, and I'm talking about a criticism of their character, and don't be Christian and don't be nice. Don't hear this morning and go, well, sometimes act like you're in an argument. You're always blank. You're blank. This is not just this thing hurt me. This is a criticism of their character. For the sake of giving you this tool this morning, I'm going to throw Tiffany under the bus. What is it for you? My spouse is harsh. They're critical. They're a mess. My goodness, they're a mess. You are a mess. You're always a mess. For Tiffany, if we were in the heat of something here, I would say Tiffany is always late. Always late. Now that criticism of her character, underneath that is a lot of times where she's been late. Hundreds of times that she's been late. What's not under that is the hundreds of times that she was on time. And that's what she likes to bring to me when I say you're always late. She likes to say always. So I've never been on time once in our marriage. Maybe once. Definitely not twice. But if you dig a little deeper, what you'll find is an unmet longing or desire. And if you're willing to be vulnerable enough and courageous enough to express this, it can get you out of the argument. So here's a story to end our time. It's a date night. We don't have many of them, but we do have many kids. And so I'm looking forward to that date night. We're supposed to start at 5:30. I come home just before 5:30 and I bring the sitter with me, only to find that Tiffany is not ready. She is always late. And so I pay the sitter the first 45 minutes just to sit there while she finishes up whatever was going on and gets ready. We leave 45 minutes late. We get in the car and it is what? It's crickets. until Tiffany goes, "Are you mad at me?" And I go, "Nope, yep. No, yeah, yep, for sure." "Why?" "You're always late." Then she fires back, "Do you have any idea what my day is like? What were you? You were like at the office reading a book. I've got 4 in diapers, and you just think you're gonna come home and everything's gonna be all right and we're gonna be ready. You're clueless." And then I spend the next 45 minutes of our date sitting in a car arguing over why she was late, as she refuses to just say, "I'm sorry I was late," because I continue to complain, which is easy. Here's the other option I have, but it would require courage, and it would require something of me, which is not usually what I'm up for. I'm up for all things that require something of her. So I say to her, "I spent all day thinking about this date night. I was so excited to be with you. I was excited about space. I was excited about the food. I was excited about time, whatever it is for you. And when I came home and you weren't ready, what it communicated to me is that you weren't excited, that you weren't into this." And I immediately felt stupid. Like here I was excited about something that my wife's not excited about. So now look, my rejection wound is coming up, right? And all of a sudden, she sees the unmet longing, which can be validated, rather than the complaint, which we go back and forth on. And she can say, "That's not it at all." But listen to me. What's better than voicing an unmet longing is actually having the courage or the guts to come to your spouse again and say, "This is the longing and the desire that I..." Don't wait for it to be disappointed. That's going to get ugly. But what I'm challenging you to do again is to ask and to make your need known. And to not only say, "This is what I desire," but maybe even, "This is how I would feel if this is what we were doing." Again, you're sitting here thinking, "Oh, piece of cake, yeah, right." You can go back to leaking and hinting and complaining in a hot second. This requires courage to move towards it. So as the band leads us in one last song, would you be willing to stand with me? I think Tiff and I felt led just to ask on behalf of the marriages here. So we're going to pray for you and over you, that you would be able, that God would give you ears to hear, that you would hear one another again, and that you would ask again and have the guts to go again. Lord, we just pray for the marriages represented in this room and the marriages to come. And we want to ask that they would display the truth of the gospel, that the mystery of the gospel would make sense to the people outside of this church because of the marriages inside this church, that they would see something of God when they see the marriages here. And I just want to pray right now, God, for hope. Hope being that intersection between agency and pathway, that people would feel fresh agency right now to do these things, to listen again, to go again, to hear what their spouse is saying, And then the pathway, like an ability to do that. I pray, God, that you would be a way maker for marriages and conversations and arguments that feel stuck. I pray that something new would open up. I pray, God, courage for those who feel shut down. I pray courage for those who feel disappointed. Help them to put their hearts out there and to lean into their relationship with their spouse again. I bless the hurting this morning, the disappointed this morning. I ask right now, give them fresh hope. Thank you that what we need is not found in our spouse, and that you can supply what's lacking, and you can give us something to give away. So I ask that you would make a deposit in us that would help us to meet the needs of the person that you've put next to us. In Jesus' name, amen.